All right, everyone. Good afternoon. And thanks again for joining us. My name is Scott Cloutier again, and I am the Events and Program Specialist here at Scribe. We'd like to welcome you to our Accelerate Access to Critical Customer Data with Simple Salesforce Migration webinar. Just a few housekeeping details before we get started. Our phone lines are muted. Today's presentation should be approximately 30 to 40 minutes. If you have questions, feel free to go ahead and put those questions in the questions area of GoToMeeting. You can also tweet at us if you'd like to tweet at ScribeSoft with the hashtag SFMigration. We can certainly answer questions that way as well. We'll be watching the Twitter feed. And we will address all those questions at the end of the presentation. So we'd love for you to ask them and tweet at us. A recorded version of the webinar will be available for you after it's over. And we will also send out the deck as well. And when you exit the webinar, we'll have a survey that you just need to fill out really quick to just let us know some more information about this webinar in particular. So I'm joined today by two speakers. Nicole Tilton, she is our Director of the Salesforce Sales Channel here at Scribe. And I'm also joined by Pierre Hulsebus, who is a Senior Sales Engineer, and he'll be taking you through a technical demonstration of Scribe Online today. Just a really brief agenda of what we're going over today. So we'll talk very briefly about Scribe, and just a little overview. Then we'll talk about the customer experience, our common customer experiences around migration, Salesforce migration. And we'll also talk about the challenges that we find customers have while they're migrating their data. We'll show you a little bit about the Scribe Online architecture, then go into a demonstration, and then we'll go ahead and recap that and have questions and next steps. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Nicole.
Thank you, Scott, and welcome everyone. So just a quick overview of Scribe. We're an established global provider of solutions that easily bring customer data anywhere it's needed. So whether your systems are cloud-based, on-premise, or even a mix of both. We've been in business for about 19 years, and integration is all that we do. Today we're coming to you from our headquarters in Manchester, New Hampshire, and we also have a remote office in the Netherlands. We do have two primary offerings, Scribe Insight and Scribe Online. Scribe Insight is our on-premise offering, and Scribe Online is our cloud platform. Today our focus will be on Scribe Online. So we are about 12,000 customers strong and have over 1,200 partners worldwide. So a little bit about some customer experiences with Scribe in the migration of data. The migration of data from an existing system is often the first challenge a company is confronted with when embarking on a new CRM system. As we'll touch on in the upcoming slides, it can dramatically affect the initial adoption and success of your CRM investment. So as you can see from the customer review here, Scribe Online makes that transition easy for you. This particular customer was faced with migrating data from Dynamics CRM to Salesforce and needed to get critical account, contact, and activity data into the new system quickly. And as you can see, they did so with favorable reviews. Another customer experience I'd like to share is a software company in the HR and workforce solutions space. They needed to migrate both initial customer data from Dynamics CRM into Salesforce, as well as integrate with their ERP, which is QuickBooks Desktop. They took a phased approach to the migration, starting with accounts and contacts. And then as sort of a mini phase two, they tackled their service data. As Pierre will touch on today, migration projects are often split into phases and become sort of mini integration projects. So on to the challenges. There are four major challenges customers face when deploying a new CRM system, and we're going to touch on four of them today. The first being user adoption, and this is an ongoing challenge. You want your users to use the CRM system, and one of the surest ways to affect positive adoption is to give your users the data that they need from the other systems that they work with on a daily basis. So according to a principal analyst at Forrester, out of all the CRM projects problems reported, we found the most significant threat to slow adoption the threat is slow user adoption, and that's coming in at about 49% of customer projects. The second thing that we'll tackle are user needs. And so this is profiling your users. What data do they need from other systems? What customer master data, activity history, order history, notes and attachments do your users need? So third and fourth, these are things that Pierre's going to touch on today. The third being data staging. And this is where we'll dig into technical details to consider when migrating data. How to handle things like multiple data sources, key cross-reference tables, data ownership, and more. So again, data issues, Pierre's going to touch on things to consider when managing parent-child relationships, activity migration, and attachments. So the first thing I want to talk about is user adoption. And there's many different takes on CRM user adoption out there today, and they're all valid. A few of them include including users in the design and deployment of your system, aligning your CRM processes with the processes of your sales team, all very common sense kind of approaches to user adoption. Build trust within your sales team. The system's going to be more than just Big Brother watching you, and ultimately getting user buy-in. But what we at Scribe have found is that data is really the crux of the user adoption and usage issues all companies face. So give your users their own slice of data to start with. And I'm not really just talking about bringing over account and contact data. Bring in the data they need to do their jobs on a daily basis from the other systems that they interact with. CRM should provide a single and total view of the customer. So being a salesperson as well as a Salesforce user myself, I need data on a regular basis from multiple systems within Scribe. ERP, which we use is Great Plains, marketing automation, which is SilverPop we use internally, support and entitlements. So by bringing all that data over, I've been provided with a real tangible basis for CRM adoption and usage. Another consideration is to ensure data quality exists in the new CRM. Cleanup and duping should be a part of that process. Load the right data for the right groups of users, which leads us to our next slide, user needs. So one way of looking at the data needs of your users is through personas. Group your users into types to determine what data they need out of which systems to effectively do their jobs. So we've got 4 primary user personas that we'll cover. Marketing, for example, Mary the marketer, she needs more qualified leads and metrics about campaigns. So for an example, purchase lists and BI. Sales, we've got Sam the seller. He needs to sell more faster. And how can he do this? Provide customer master data and purchase history from the ERP system that they're working with. Provide credit status. What campaigns are prospects responding to? These are all the kinds of things that people in a sales role are looking for. Finance, example, Frank the financer. He wants a shorter quote-to-cash cycle and improved efficiencies. Support and service. Sarah the supporter. She needs faster, more informed responses to customers. She needs ticket and entitlement data. So in addition to personas, you want to look at the needs of end users from their perspective. So how are they actually going to use the system? Record and data ownership needs to be tied to the right person with any related activity history, tasks, and opportunities. You want to ensure simple things like activity and task dates are correct to maintain the quality of data. Imagine if you loaded all the activities into the system with today's date. That's not going to give you an accurate view of the history of what's going on in that particular account. And Pierre's going to touch on these issues more in the upcoming couple of slides. So at this point, I'm going to transition over to Pierre.
Thanks, Nicole. How you doing? Having a good day? All right. Yeah, so let's talk about a little bit of the methodology that happens. So, you know, integration as a whole and migration, I like to say it's a little bit of art and it's a little bit of science, right? So the science you'll see in the technology that we have and how we execute the strategies from the mappings and the connections and all of that stuff. But what is also very important is having a good strategy going into this. So I want to talk a little about one of the primary strategies that you need to walk through before you actually do the actually moving the data through, and that is staging the data up. So this is a challenge, right? Because we were getting data a lot of times from different external sources. So the data migration platform needs to be able to manage connections to all of those different things. So one example would be a text file. We may be getting text files that get exported from a certain application, and so then we're going to be migrating the text files into the system from there. So Scribe, for example, has a connector for text applications and text-based data. You might also have stuff that's coming in from other Salesforce.com instances. So maybe an organization is merging two organizations, and they have let's say one Salesforce instance, and they want to migrate onto a new one, or merging companies together or something on this order. So we need to be able to have multiple connections for that, or really other CRM systems, like maybe somebody's migrating from Dynamics CRM over to Salesforce. That was one of the testimonials that we saw from a customer there earlier discussed. Internally, when we're building this staging system, we also want to be able to establish cross-reference, an area for us to manage what we call cross-reference tables or cross-reference data. And that's because when we're migrating data into the system from an external source, there's typically some sort of unique identifier that's in that external source. And we're going to want to build a cross-reference system in our staging area, so we would be able then to utilize that cross-reference with the Salesforce record IDs, right? So kind of under the covers, Salesforce assigns a unique ID to every record. So when I put that customer in to Salesforce, or that contact record, I'm going to want to write that information back into my source database. So when we deal with these kind of hierarchical issues between parent and child records, and we'll touch on that in our example today, how do we handle that? This is one area where that can work. Now, we want to typically use a flexible staging platform, and what I mean by that is something that I can easily manipulate the data through other queries or joins. I also want to be able to write back to that data if possible. So, a couple of the primary platforms that folks are using is, if we're doing text files, they're going to use a CSV platform, which basically emulates a database table structure in a file. The other one would be to use a SQL platform, either MySQL or Microsoft SQL, for the staging data and kind of pushing the data in there. Sometimes you can reach out right to the application data directly too, through a direct database connection. So it just depends on what you're really trying to do, but this is something that the platform does make a difference in its agility for you to be able to do these things quickly. And it's important to understand the type of information that is important for the different users. So as Nicole had mentioned, there's different personas, and as you have that discussion with those different groups to understand their needs, you would be able to categorize then the data into different things. So some organizations really need to have all the attachments, and other users don't really care about the attachments if there's attachments in the legacy system. The same thing with activities. The question would be, how far back do we want to go back in our staging data? So we can stage up all the data, but then when we move it over into our production environment, then we would just maybe only move the last year's worth of activities as opposed to all the activities. And so it just depends. And the other thing that's important in the staging data, that you establish a methodology, as Nicole was saying, for some sort of indicator for what the record owners are. Who owns these customer records? Who's the person that owns the pending phone calls and all of those types of things? And what were the created on dates in the system for those historical pieces of activities? So when we look back at a customer record and see the history of phone calls, let's say, that we've had with all the notes, now we can see them, in the proper sequence. And it's kind of neat, actually, when you go into Salesforce and you've migrated, let's say, somebody that was running Goldmine, let's say, for back to the mid-90s when they started running Goldmine or ACT, and you migrate somebody off of an old legacy platform like that into Salesforce. When you go into the history, you see these emails and phone calls that happened back, before Salesforce was even born as a company. So it's pretty cool. And that's that's kind of some of the ideas around challenges that we have when we stage the data. Can we go to the next slide? There we go. So some of those data-related issues that we're going to have to just make sure that we discuss and deal with are the parent-child relationships that occur in the data. And what we mean by that is you have an account record, and underneath that account record, you're going to have, the 5 people that are the contacts at that place. If we're bringing data in from an ERP system, we're going to have an account. And if the customer has lots of shipping addresses, we may send the bill one place but have 50 different shipping addresses or 100 shipping addresses for those locations. These are the kind of things that you kind of get on the whiteboard and kind of talk through those with your users to see how they want to see that information in the CRM system inside of Salesforce. So this parent-child relationship, we need to have some sort of hint inside of the data that says this contact or this address belongs to this account record. So there's got to be some sort of pointer up there, whether that's the email domain or the phone number or some sort of customer ID number, something that we can say when we add this contact into the system, parent it to this account or record. So also, as I just hinted at, activity migration is the same thing. We want to be able to make sure that we're working with the end users to make sure we get the ownership of the records right. We have those activity dates, and also one that people always forget or seem to forget, or it's easy to forget, is the status. So that status actually is very important when we're migrating off of a system that people are using today, and we're going to migrate them over to a new system, because when they went in yesterday, so to speak, and looked at what are the phone calls that I need to make, they're looking, typically those views are built around a status of opened or closed. And so we want to migrate all the open phone calls that they need to make, or all the open activities that haven't happened yet. So all of those reports and their user experience is great. And finally, on the data issues is attachments. And kind of as I talked a little bit about, it's not just the locations or it's not just the should we bring them over, but when we do bring them over, if we're going to bring them over, we need to understand the locations of them. Scribe basically needs to have some sort of way to read those files into Salesforce as if somebody was doing the attachment themselves. And Scribe can do that. We handle attachments just great. One of the things that we're seeing, though, folks doing that are current Salesforce customers of ours is reconsidering doing attachments even in Salesforce, because it adds obviously to the size and the bulk of the Salesforce installation, and you get into some of the metering issues with that and the limitations that your particular subscription to Salesforce has. And so a lot of folks are actually using Scribe as a way to migrate attachment data out of Salesforce and put it into something like SharePoint, and we have a methodology for that. We have a partner that's built a great adapter for SharePoint, and a lot of folks are doing that, kind of building a SharePoint site per customer, and then putting all the attachment data, in there and taking it out of Salesforce. That reduces that data footprint inside of the Salesforce organization. So. Just before, this will be my last slide, just before we get into the demo, we just wanted to talk a little bit about the architecture, because you'll see a couple things on the screen, but we'll go over this really quick. We have other deep dive kind of technical things that are available, but up on the left-hand side, up on the top, it says onlinescribesoft.com. That's where you log into Scribe. So we're a web-based application, so you open it up in a web browser, of course, and so you log in with the username and password, and that controls the Scribe Online cloud experience for you. And today, when we're working with local data that's running on a local machine, which is typically where that data sits for us when we're doing a migration, what we're interacting with is what we call agents. Now, the agent is over on the left-hand side towards the bottom. It says on-premise agent. It's that little gear on the bottom. That's a little piece of software. It's a 20 meg installation, and that installs down on the machine that you're connecting to, where your data is. So that plugs in. That's what that little plug is. It plugs into your local data. And there's no user interface at all for that agent. It's all controlled through the web browser, so you don't have to do anything with it, but you will. It will get installed, and that will access the local data. And the agent itself is what does the communication outbound, as you can see, through the firewall out to the Salesforce cloud. And so your application experience for Scribe, I'm in a web browser, but the data moves through the agent itself. So Scribe doesn't like query for the local data and then send it up to Scribe's cloud. What it does is that agent just operates on that data locally, and it makes the connection out. So Scribe doesn't. We're not in receipt of your customer information. So it all stays local and in your Salesforce. So it's very secure. So let's move over to my desktop, and we'll share out the environment with you here. So I'm going to show my screen. All right, can you guys see it over there, Scott?
We can.
All right, super. So let's start with the data source. So for me, the data source in my migration that we're going to do today is a SQL table, SQL database. So I have this database that's running locally on my system. It's called Big Data. And inside of this, I just have, we'll use this, it's just a list of random company names and addresses and people. So none of this is real data, but the addresses are real. So they tie out to things like mappings or any the other stuff, excuse me, that we deal with. Anyway, so this is my source, and I just have a SQL select statement here. That is what I'm doing to access this local data. So we'll use this SQL statement in order to get at the customer records that we're going to migrate. And in here, I have, if you can see, I'm just dealing with one table. It has the company name, and then it has the name of the person. Now, what I want to do in my migration, because this is very typical of the type of data that we would get for migration, would be in Salesforce, I really want to have a contact record for Julie, and then a separate account record for Downers Grove Historical Museum. I want to have that company record be the parent to Julie's contact record. So in the migration project, we will do that. We will make this kind of hierarchy between the two. So that's where, and we're going to put it over here into my Salesforce thing. So I don't have any data over here yet. This is my Salesforce target that we're logging into. So how Scribe does that, as we mentioned, we have, if you're been with Scribe, as Nicole had said, we've been around for quite some time doing this. 18 years Scribe has been doing data integration. So one of the things people love about Scribe is that we have these things called connectors. So I've got a connector here to Salesforce. And all that connector, as an end user, I have to provide is this URL with the username and password. And that's as technical as it gets, not much more complicated than that. And so Scribe kind of handles all the other stuff that needs to happen underneath the covers there to make our connection go in. It logs into Salesforce. It gets all of the objects that I can work with, all the data types, everything like that. We also have a connector here to SQL. So I've got my SQL database connection, and so this is my connection into that particular table that we were just talking about. So I'm just logging in with the username and password into that table. And as we were saying, you could also maybe, if you're getting text data from other systems, I just wanted to show this, pop this up on the screen. If we're maybe getting text from another system, maybe a data loader or file or other kind of text files, Scribe can handle those different types of files, and you can store them not only locally, but maybe if you had an out in Dropbox or an FTP site or something like that, Scribe can connect into all of those. And the way that we do that is we connect into the actual files themselves, and so it's connecting right into that particular CSV file that I have staged up, and it's just taking that first row and it pulls in the data, just kind of like a data integration tool should work, right? So you're able to handle all sorts of different text files too with this system. So kind of once you have those all set up, your connections set up, as I mentioned, you have an agent installed. This agent is running. It runs as a service, so it's just running here on my local laptop. and it runs here locally on my machine. Then we can start to build our actual migration. So let's log into our migration. The migrations are sets of maps. We call these maps. This is where the utility and facility is set up to push and pull the data back and forth and do any sort of transformation if needed. So the first thing that you're going to notice, hopefully, is this looks really cool. It has this neat interface. This interface is used to make it super simple for somebody who's not a developer, and believe me, I'm not a developer. I took Pascal in college back in '94, so a long time ago, and that's as far as I got. So I don't need to do a lot. I don't need to be a developer to use this tool. So this system that we have has shapes, and those shapes are built purposefully so that only certain shapes fit next to certain objects. So I have this query. We of course always start off with a query, so that's got this little curvy part on the top. And as you can see, after the query, I have another block called for each result. Now there's other blocks here. They don't fit there, right? So this system is really helping you establish the proper syntax and the order for operations in the system, so you kind of get it right, and it's really helpful. So the first thing that we're starting out, as we mentioned, is with a query. So I'm just clicking on my query, and I have my query into that test database and that I've set up, and so I'm going to select the top 1,000 records. And when you make that connection in there, I'm going to hit test. And you can see this little error in the back. It's saying it has to test it, and now the error has gone away because it successfully retrieved all the metadata, and it's ready to go. So from there, once I get my query set, now I'm going into this next block, which is I pulled over from over here for each result. So that's the block I brought in over there. And in here, I'm creating something. So I bought my create block over here and painted two blocks in there, one to create an account record. So let's pull that up here. And as we were saying, as a Scribe user, what you would expect when we're connecting into Salesforce is an access to all of the entities that are part of Salesforce. So if I want to bring in leads, or I'm going to bring in notes, so you would have a mapping basically for each one of the different entities that you're going to be migrating over. So in this case, I'm doing accounts and contacts. So I'm connecting into the account object. That's my target. So that's over here is the account object. So here's all the fields on that account object, whether they're on the forms or not. These are part of that, what Scribe is getting from Salesforce. So standard fields like latitude and longitude, but also custom fields that I've added as a user in the system. And then over here on the left-hand side, of course, are all of my fields that are a result of my query. Now, Scribe has this really cool thing. It's drag and drop. So I highlight my city, for example. This is the field, and I want to go on the shipping city. So I just drag it, and I drop it onto the form. And that's all I need to do from a mapping standpoint. If I don't need to change the data in any significant way, I can just drag and drop it over there, and it's good to go. Now, if I want to manipulate the data in a significant way, though, maybe I want to do some sort of math or convert the data. We call it transform the data. Then we can do those types of things. Scribe has a library of functions. These functions you can do. Some of them are based around time. So these are some of the things that we were talking about, where we can, transmit the data and then subtract, 365 days to make it happen last year. Those are the types of things that you can use these formulas to do. Look up to external data. We can manipulate the text. Sometimes we might need to format the data or transmit the data from maybe it's in a text format and I need to change it into an integer. Those are the types of things that Scribe can do. This is a good example here of a formatting change that people make a lot in an integration, where they have to change the phone number format. So the data might not have the right dashes and things on that, and I might want to put the format command in there to manipulate the data properly. So that's that's as hard as it gets. This is the hardest part of this whole thing is getting that mapping done properly. So you map your fields over there, and then so I create my account, and then I'm going to create a contact record. So the same thing here. I've got, I'm choosing the contact object. I'm going to my fields, and I'm taking the data from my native query, and I'm dragging them over, and I've dropped them onto the form here. Now, in order to get that hierarchy, as we were talking about, that parent-child relationship, on the contact record, you do it always from the child. You say, I belong to this parent. And this is the Salesforce account create ID. So you can see up here, I got this little arrow. I can pull this down here. And what this shows me is the record that got created in Salesforce. So all the fields and, of course, that ID, that record ID. And so I've just dragged this and dropped that onto the form there. And so this is the internal hidden ID that you don't see on the form, but is part of that record. And this is what makes that link between the two records. So we can go ahead. So that is how you build this kind of thing out. So I'm just going to hit OK here to this. And what we'll see as I hit Save, it's going to go back to the kind of the home page there, so to speak. And what this is doing, we're in that area where it says preparing. And what this is doing is taking the mappings that I just did and sending it to the agent. So the agent is getting updated. And then I can run it. Oh, let me talk about that for a sec while this is preparing. It'll take a sec for that. Didn't mention this, which was scheduling. You can put this on a schedule. I, for today's purpose, have it on demand, so I can kind of push the button and guide you through this. But a lot of folks will say, well, you want this to run at a specific time, so I want to kick this one off at midnight on Friday, so this migration happens over the weekend. One of the things Nicole was saying, that sometimes our migration jobs really are integration jobs that run for a couple weeks as people migrate off an old system and they go over to a new system. So as we kind of get people trained up and we cut over to the new environment into Salesforce, people are still working in the old system for a little while, so you got to kind of keep them going for a little bit. So a lot of times folks set this up to either happen once a day or set it to reoccur every couple minutes, once a minute, and look for changes. So it's ready to go. So it's on demand. So I'm just going to hit the Run Now button. And so this will start its process and start moving the data over. You can see it's starting, and it takes about 30 seconds, 45 seconds or so, which on a webinar seems like a long time. It's like, when is it going to happen? So it's starting to spawn up and do its thing in the background, and we should start seeing data flowing here pretty soon. I'm going to hit my refresh button here, see if we got any data in there. Oh, here we go. Already got some in there. So here's the record that it just created, and then of course, as we were saying, the child entity also gets created here. So between both, we got a parent-child relationship with all of the emails and phone numbers and stuff like that, and it's under my name, and that looks like the right time. So excellent. So with that, let's go back and Nicole, I know you had some other things before we wanted to talk, maybe answer some questions or something like that, if folks had some questions. But
thanks, Pierre. We just have a couple more slides before we wrap up. I want to talk a little about the business value. When it comes to CRM implementations, most experts believe that motivation is a better method than the do-it-or-else approach. What that means to you is doing whatever it takes to get your users to want to use the CRM system. One of the easiest ways to do this is to make your CRM application a rich information delivery mechanism, and your users will want to use it to sell and service more. So really important to try to make Salesforce your central hub of customer data. Scribe Online was purpose-built for aggregating customer data into CRM from other applications and data sources. And as we showed you today, it's quick to build out solutions, thus reducing your time to business value, and ultimately reducing your total cost of ownership of your CRM system. Providing one complete view of the customer enables your teams to react quicker, sell more and service customers better. So rapid time to value, we're fast and easy to use. We showed you that today. Build out your data migrations quickly, and you'll have the maps in place, allowing you to build once and repeat often, all without coding and within your current infrastructure. You'll also be laying the framework for the next phase of your project when you tackle ongoing integrations. Simplicity, as Pierre showed you today, it's all designed with a very intuitive user interface built for ease of use. Use the same platform to connect to all of your data sources. Flexibility, it's flexible. You can change your ad applications that need to be integrated as your needs grow and change. And it's predictable. We have a predictable monthly cost with no hidden fees for additional users or connections. And proven success. This is all we do. We've been in business for 18, 19 years with over 12,000 customers and 1,200 partners worldwide. So now, Scott, why don't we take a look and see what we have for questions?
Great, and I definitely saw some questions coming in, so I think we're going to have some good discussion here. All right, so first question on here, I think Nicole can answer this one. Nicole, how can someone become a partner of Scribe?
It's actually really easy, so I would be more than happy to reach out to you to discuss the next steps after the webinar today. Great.
Okay, and Pierre, then I think we got quite a few questions coming at you from a technical perspective. Are you able to extract data from Maximizer for import into Salesforce, particularly attachments and emails?
Maximizer. Right off the top of my head, I don't know. That was something we'd have to look at. So typically there's a little bit of a process that you do to look at the way Maximizer holds its data, and you have to do a little bit of reverse engineering on that. Last time I worked with Maximizer was probably 2004. Personally worked with that app and actually deployed it a couple times. But if I recall the data structure of that application, it's in a DBF format. So Scribe would be able to read the data from that. The way the attachments were stored at the time were actually in a folder structure. So you should be able to get, that would be, those would be the older versions. So I would have to look at what the newest, kind of version is and how it handles it currently. But typically on something like that, you're reading from the database directly.
Okay, great. And can we access custom Salesforce.com objects and fields?
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's one of the coolest things about that solution that we have had, of connecting into Salesforce, is that we receive updates to the metadata. We call the metadata layer. That's just a fancy way of saying all your customizations, all your fields. And so we do have a manual process that you push a button to say refresh the metadata. And so when you make those changes and add those customizations to the system, you push a little button in Scribe, say refresh the metadata, and it just shows up in the tool. Great.
And then Pierre, I think there's two questions here that we may want to pass it back over to you for presenting purposes. Sure. So just the first one is, could you talk a little bit more, or we didn't talk about the the cross-reference between source system keys and Salesforce keys.
Sure.
And then the other one, I'll wait till after to ask you the other question.
Sure.
So I'll pass the screen back over to you.
Sure. So the little demo that I went through today, I went through and showed the simple kind of, here's a field, we're moving it over. But I did actually have this already, because I figured a question like this would come up. Because in reality, when you're doing something like this, as we were saying, you want to update the source. And so I would build this and Scribe has this cool feature where we're able to connect to multiple targets. And so as you can see here, I'm connecting in my connection side both to Salesforce and back to my staging database.
Hey, Pierre?
Yes.
Pierre, all we see is a black. I just want to make sure you're showing your screen. I can only see a black screen.
You can only see a black screen. All right, can you see something differently now? Yeah. You're only seeing black. I'm going to stop and start again. Let me stop and start it up again.
Yeah, Pierre. You know what? We'll take it offline. I'll put it back.
All
to
right.
the deck.
Well, let me. Well, I can just talk it though, because what I was saying is, from what I showed, we only had one target, which was Salesforce, but I was able to take the account ID and pass that down to the child object. So you are able to get what we call variables from one step to the next step. And when you combine that feature with the ability for Scribe to connect to multiple targets, what you do then is just you connect to that source, back to the source database, and you have a field then available for you to put that Salesforce ID in. And so you write back to the target with that Salesforce ID, and that's typically how you would manage that key cross-reference data inside of the system. So. And what was the other?
Great.
Okay. And there was another one?
And then the other question, I think, was just how would you break your SQL address field into two fields to go into Salesforce?
So the SQL address field. So there's a couple different things that you're able to do. Scribe has a function, so you would use the Scribe functions in order to parse or split the data coming in. So if I only have one field, for example, that had city, state, and zip all together in one block of text, and I need to put those into separate fields with my address and city and state and zip, those need to be mapped into three separate fields. So Scribe, you would be using a couple things. One is Scribe has a function called parse and count, and there's a couple different functions. So you basically build a little formula that looks for example, the comma between city and state. And then you know that then there's going to be a space after the state. So you're counting for spaces after commas, and you're passing those values into a function then that trims that one value into those discrete values. We also have what's called regex, which is a very powerful formula that also does that type of function. You can pass one value into that with a little bit of a script around it, and it will parse out and return or replace, quote unquote, replace the value into the target. So that's what the function library is for, is to kind of build those little formulas out.
Great, okay, and it looks like a few of you could see Pierre's presentation, so we do apologize for that technical difficulty.
So it's just you. It's just you, Scott.
Yeah, it must have just been our side. So I apologize for that, all of you. But anybody that's interested in seeing more, we'd certainly be welcome to taking any questions offline. We can get in touch with you, and you can have a demo as well offline. So if we didn't get a chance to answer your questions, we will also reach out after the webinar as well. But just to make sure that we're staying on time, we wanted to thank you guys for joining today. If you'd like to learn more about Scribe, you can certainly check out our website, scribesoft.com/salesforce. Definitely recommend you signing up for a free 15-day trial. We also have a customer success engineer who can help you get connected with your trial, so we offer lots of assistance with that. If you have any questions that we didn't answer today, we will be reaching out to you. And if you think of another one, again, sales@scribesoft.com, or you can tweet right at us. And then the final point here, when you close out of the webinar, there'll be a little survey. If you're interested in a deeper dive about migration, some more of the technical aspects, maybe hearing Pierre talk some more about migration, just let us know in that survey, and we're open to having some more webinars about that. So again, thanks for joining us, and have a great day, everyone.